G'day, just a short foreword to the video you're about to watch. On going through the edit process, I noticed that I'd forgotten a lot of stuff, left stuff out, perhaps emphasized some things a little heavier than I intended to. So please watch this video and consider it a subset of what you should be considering when you make a submission. Go and look at all the other videos that are giving you guidance on this subject. It's important you get a very broad view of things. My view is a little narrower than some people's. I'm a little bolshy, and I tend to think that, we need to push back on this whole thing. Other people have accepted the fact that this is inevitable, it's going to come, so let's try and just water it down a bit. I take a slightly different perspective. I think that you shouldn't accept something just because it's better than what could be if it's still really bad. So, watch my video, bear that in mind. Go and look at the FliteTest video. I'll put a link in the description of this video. They've done a submission, very good submission, but it is, from where I stand, a little bit like throwing your hands up and saying, okay, we give in, do what you like, but please be kind to us. You may have that perspective. I'm not going to try and influence you. You've got to make this submission something that you believe in. So watch the video, put your comments in the commenty bit, and then go and watch all the others as well if you haven't already. And stay tuned, because my own video submission will be coming up very shortly. Thanks for watching. On with the video. G'day and welcome back to the channel. This is the video about how to make your submission and the tack you should take and what I think is the best way to approach this. Now, I'm just one opinion. Other people have made videos very similar telling you how to go about this. Mine's a little bit different, I think, in places. So you just watch them all. Watch them all. Don't just rely on me. Watch them all and decide for yourself which is the best way to make a submission and which is the best angle to use. Now, I know that the likes of FliteTest and the AMA have said that you should be looking at your personal situation, presenting your own case and how this is going to affect you and your family and whatever. And possibly that's true, but I don't know that's going to have too much effect, to be honest, because if you look at the 3 justifications for the NPRM, the FAA has come up with 3 reasons why they need these new rules: safety, security, and accountability. How you feel about it, that doesn't figure. That's not part of the 3. So I have a feeling that unless you address the 3 core issues, your submission really won't carry much weight. It's not the FAA's job to make sure you're happy. It's their job to make sure the airspace is safe, secure, and that people using it are accountable for their actions. So the fact that this will ruin your hobby, they don't give a damn. Why should they? It's not their purview to protect the hobby. And we've seen that because under the proposed NPRM, the hobby will be destroyed. There'll be everyone flying scratch-built or craft with non-remote ID capabilities will be confined to little fields called freers, and over a period of time, those will disappear as land use changes. So the FAA has made it very clear they don't give a damn about the hobby. So going to them and pleading, oh, please, you ruin our hobby, I don't think that's going to have a whole lot of effect, but include it anyway. It may. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I think it was the 21st of February, 1972. I think I said I wanted the broccoli and I should have had the cauliflower. But anyway, that's irrelevant. I'm not perfect. I'm certainly not perfect. So that's just my opinion on this. I think we should focus on the facts, the evidence, the science, the data. I think those are the things that are irrefutable. Now, the FAA can say, oh, we're protecting the hobby. We've got these freers. That's not a concern. These hobbyists, they're just overreacting. And the politicians will go, oh, yeah, I can see that. You've set aside these areas. They can use those. What are they talking about? Or they may just turn around and say, okay, we're going to review as I've said before, we're going to review the freer situation every 1 to 5 years or whatever. So the hobby can exist because we'll issue new freers every now and then. You're all right. Go fly your planes in a paddock somewhere. Which is not the ideal solution for most people coming into the hobby these days, because they don't want to fly in these grassy fields. So be aware that you're setting yourself a trap if you focus on you're going to destroy the hobby. There are far more important issues, and they have to fall into one of these 3 categories. So let's first of all talk about how to make your submission. There is a web form online. I'll put a link to that in the description of this. You can go to that web form, put all your details in. It gives you a little box to type in your submission. Unless you've got a very short submission, it's probably not the best way to make that submission because it only has a certain size. I forget how many characters you can put in there, but you'll get to the end and it'll tell you, oh, your submission can't be submitted because it's too long. And that's really annoying, and so many web forms do that. I don't know if this one does, but it's quite often you get that situation. So if you want to, I'd say if you want to present a typed or written submission, do it on your word processor, Microsoft Word or whatever you got, LibreOffice, Writer, whatever. Type it up. And then you can go back, leave it for a day, come back, reread it, see if it still makes sense, because I know from having done a lot of writing over many years that when you write something, airplanes at the airfield. When you write something, you should always just sleep on it, come back and read it again, because you pick up all the mistakes and you'll see things that don't scan properly, and you'll be able to fix it up, and it'll be much better when you've slept on it and you proofread it the next day, or get someone else to proofread it, make sure it sounds good, because spare a thought for the poor soulless individuals who are going to have to go through all these submissions and read them. Oh my goodness, now I think there's over 20,000, probably 25,000 by now, and hopefully by the time we're finished there'll be twice that number. That's a lot of material to read, and some of these things are like miles long. So that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and I don't think there'll be a big team on this because it's the FAA, they don't have a lot of resources. So the poor sod that's got to sit there and read all these reviews, don't make their life a misery. Try and make it a little bit, less miserable than it's going to be. And for that reason, I'd say be polite, be courteous, be respectful. You're not going to win any friends by cursing people out or by being rude and offensive. And you want these people on your side. You want them to put a tick on your submission and say, yeah, they should be looked at. Not just throw it in the bin because you're rude to them. Use common sense, use psychology. Try and befriend these people with your submission. Don't alienate them. So yeah, just treat them like your grandmother. If you're writing a letter to your grandmother, you'd be polite and respectful and try and make her think you're a really nice grandson. Do the same thing with this. Make these people think you're a nice person, because everyone likes nice people. We don't like asses. So that's an important thing. So yeah, as I say, we've got the web form. It's got the little box you can type in. It's limiting in terms of characters. So I'd suggest doing it up in a word processor, and you can send it in as a file then. And then you can make it as long as you like. You can include pictures, and you can bold stuff, and you can italicize and all that sort of stuff, which you can't do on the web form. So that's one way of doing it. The other way, which is the way I'll be doing it, is I'm going to do a video, much like this one. And I'll put it up. I'll put 2 copies up. I'm going to put one up on YouTube, so you all can see it, and it'll be public, it'll be monetized, because I'm poor and I need the dough. The other one I will put up as an unlisted video. Unlisted on YouTube. And I suggest that you do the same. Even if you make the bulk of your submission by way of a written submission, include a video. Put a video on your YouTube channel, unlisted, right? And don't look at it yourself, just upload it and leave it. And put a link in your submission. And say that this video is an important part of my submission. And then just see if anyone watches the video, because YouTube will have a view count of 0 until someone watches the video. Now, if it comes to the end of the submission process and the FAA tells us all the submissions have been read and considered, and you still have a view count of 0, well, you can say, I'm sorry, but you're lying, because you haven't looked at my damn video. YouTube isn't lying. They'll tell if someone's looked at my video, and you can use that evidence if you go to your politicians and say, look, I'm sorry, the FAA has abused the system. They have not considered all the submissions because I put my submission on YouTube and they didn't look at it. And we might need that. Our politicians are going to be the last wall of hope if this all goes belly up. So we need to prepare for that. We need to strategy, thinking ahead. You've got to think 2 steps ahead. So we've always got to be aware that the NPRM could get just thrown into rules, and we may need to challenge it through the political system and go to your local representative and say, look, this is totally unreasonable. There's been an abuse of the system and the FAA haven't followed the rules. Therefore, these rules should be invalidated because they have not followed the process. We need the evidence to do that. That 0 count on your video submission is very good evidence. So do that. I'm sure now that I've mentioned this and the FAA have watched my video, they'll be making sure they click, even if just for 5 seconds. But then you can look at the analytics and see viewer retention. They've got to watch it to the end, people. You've got to watch it to the end or it doesn't count. It's not like you can just pick up a submission, read the first word and go done. No, they've got to watch it to the end. So again, in your video, be polite, be respectful, and provide information. But of course, if you're doing a video, you can provide video information. You can provide audio information. You can provide a lot more stuff. And also, if you think that this whole personal side of things, here's my personal case, you've got more opportunity to show your passion and how this was going to affect you from the point of view of removing your freedoms as a hobbyist. So, the many avenues, and video is a really good way of doing it. If you're not confident in front of a camera, then still include video as part of your submission, even if it's just to say, please don't take my hobby, or this is me. I wanted to put a face to my submission. You've got to do that, whatever you do, but we need to hold them accountable. Because that's one of the 3 things that the FAA says these rules are supposed to address. So let's look at the 3 things that the FAA is saying justify the introduction of these rules and the removal of the freedoms that they will remove. The 3 things that justify the NPRM, according to the FAA, are safety, security, and accountability. There you go, 3 things. They want the airspace to be safe, they want it to be secure, and they want the people who use it to be accountable for their actions. And on the face of it, that sounds pretty damn good. I'll have a teaspoon of that, please. That sounds like a jolly good idea, but there's a problem. And I'm going to challenge these things. Okay, the FAA are saying we need these NPRMs to make sure the airspace is safe. And my response would be, can you please provide the evidence to justify this assertion, because it seems to be in conflict with the data and the science that I've seen? And then you include a link to the George Mason University study, which used bird strike data to calculate the risks of a drone hitting a manned aircraft and the outcome of such a collision. It's science, that's science for you, mate. They've done the science. They looked at that and produced numbers which basically say the risks are very, very, very small. And then you look at the history, the data from the last 10 years. You say recreational multirotor drones have been a thing for the last 10 years. And during that entire decade, not one person has died as a result of the recreational use of multirotor drones anywhere in the world. And you say, so how can you say it is a safety issue? The data, the historical data proves the risk is very, very low. There are far more important things to be worried about in terms of safety than recreational multirotor drone and recreational model aircraft use in the USA. So on those grounds, I challenge the assertion that these rules in their entirety are essential to establish safety. That's it, simple. And you provide the science, you provide the evidence, you provided the data. They can't argue that. They can't argue it. It's proven. It's not like you're saying, oh, I don't think. You can't use think. Think doesn't matter. They don't care what you think. The only way you can fight this is with data and evidence. You provide the data and the evidence. Links to the George Mason University study in the description of this video. You can always include that in your submission, please. Now, while on the subject of safety, I would also challenge them and say, this proposed network remote ID system and its ability to integrate manned and unmanned aviation into the same airspace is actually counter to safety. And I would say, at the moment, the present system has proven to work extremely well. There have been no deaths. There have been no serious injuries as a result of drones and manned aircraft coming into conflict. I would say, however, if you integrate drones into the manned airspace through this remote ID system, this integration relies on GPS and network connectivity. So what happens if GPS is lost or remote connectivity is lost? How do you then manage the traffic? Situation, here's a manned aircraft. Here's a drone. They're both using technology to report their positions to a traffic control system. Traffic control system therefore says, oh, we go down there, plane flies over here. Or there's a plane flying around, the remote traffic control system says, you can't take off because there's a plane up there. Okay, now, but what happens is you've got a manned aircraft and a drone. And suddenly there's a solar flare, a coronal mass ejection, and the GPS system goes out. No GPS signals, right? Oh my goodness. Now the manned aircraft, there's someone in there looking out the window, they know roughly where they are. They can look out for other aircraft. The drone does not know where it is. No GPS, doesn't know where it is, right? Remember, most of these commercial drones are going to be automated. They'll be just flying themselves. There won't be someone sitting there with goggles on flying it. It'll be all automated. GPS goes out. What does the drone do? What does it do? Well, boom, it crashes into the damn airplane. That's what it does. So there is a massive failure mechanism built into this integration strategy. And there's two massive failure. If the network system goes down, then although the drone knows where it is, it doesn't know where the aircraft are. And although the aircraft knows where it is, it doesn't know where the drones are. And as we've seen, seeing a drone from an aircraft is not always an easy thing. So the risk goes astronomical in the blink of an eye. If GPS goes out or the network system goes out or the UTM goes down, any of those 3 points could cause massive increase in risk. Whereas the current system, where manned aircraft are 500 feet and above and drones and model aircraft are 400 feet and below, if there's a loss of GPS, not really that important, because the drone can automatically, it's got barometers. Barometers work no matter what. You know, the sky could be on fire and the barometer will still work. So it will be able to maintain its maximum altitude, but won't go above 400 feet because it's got barometric sensor. So it can stay in the safe area. The manned aircraft, they can stay in the safe area. No risk to either party. So this remote ID-based integration system adds a huge level of risk to what is presently a very safe management strategy. And I would point that out to the FAA and say that if this is a set of rules designed to improve safety, then how do you mitigate the fact that there are now 3 major points of failure, any of which could cause loss of human life? Ask them, challenge them, point that out to them. It's important. If they're going to say that they need safety, this is for safety, please explain. Please explain this. The other thing is, of course, you cannot mount a safety case without a comprehensive risk assessment. If you do not understand a problem, you can't really come up with a good fitting solution, can you? You know, if someone says, oh, there's a hole over there, can you plug it up? You probably need to know if it's a round hole or a square hole or a triangular hole before you cut the piece of whatever you're going to use to plug the hole. The FAA is just saying, we've got a hole, we need to plug it up. But they don't understand the nature of the hole, they don't understand the size, the scope, they don't understand what to do to plug the hole. So I would challenge them and say, it is unreasonable to impose far-reaching restrictions on the freedoms of people who have historically proven to be extremely responsible, accountable, and safe in their activities without a comprehensive, peer-reviewed risk assessment. And just make that presentation. Say, can you please direct me to that risk assessment? I have not seen it. I have presented you with the facts, the evidence, the data to back up my assertions. Please provide me with the risk assessment to back up your assertions in respect to safety. That's a simple challenge, And if they fail to do that, you know why they fail to do that. And what we need to do as a community afterwards is get everything together and just see how they've responded to what we've said. But that's what I'd say. From the perspective of safety, they have not proven their case. And if you haven't proven your case, you cannot take away people's freedoms. That's basically the way I would approach this safety issue. Now we come on to the thorny issue of security. Well, what is security? I mean, is it preventing bad actors from launching attacks using drones? Is it making sure that state secrets are not stolen by snooping drones? It's not. I didn't see a very good definition of it, but let's just assume it's both. Let's assume it's both. So again, we need some proof that there is actually a security risk. Sure, someone could tie explosives to a drone and fly it and blow people up. They could. Never happened on the continental USA. It's never happened. But people have put explosives in pressure cookers and blown them up at marathons and killed people. Yet we don't see that actual use of an item to commit a terror attack as justification for restricting the availability of it, requiring it to have remote ID, requiring it to be registered, and the people who buy the pressure cookers to be licensed. We don't see that as a justification. So given that we have never seen a security issue involving a drone or a model aircraft in the continental USA, how do they justify imposing these restrictions, removing these freedoms? Surely, if security is an issue, then pressure cookers should be far more regulated than they are, because we've proven they pose a security risk to the safety of the nation. There's no proof that model aircraft or drones provide such a risk. So again, where is the risk analysis that quantifies and scopes the security risks associated with what we're doing? I would again ask, please point me to the comprehensive, independently peer-reviewed risk assessment that justifies the removal of the freedoms dictated by the NPRM that is before us. Just ask them, challenge them, say that the evidence is insufficient to justify the removal of those freedoms. It's insufficient. That's it. That's what I'd say. Now, the third one, accountability. And I'm not a total naysayer in respect to all these things. I think people should be accountable for their actions. And I've got no problem with holding model flyers and drone operators accountable for what they do. If you don't have accountability, then people tend to take bigger risks and bad actors don't get caught. So yeah, accountability, thumbs up from me. It's just how we establish that accountability that becomes the problem. The current system, the remote ID obviously is very much focused on accountability. Some idiot flies his drone at an international airport. You want to know who it is and where they are. So you can go and round them up, remove the threat, and punish them for their actions. It's not unreasonable. Not unreasonable at all. It is the mechanisms by which they're trying to hold people accountable that are perhaps worthy of some discussion. And first of all, they are proposing the use of technology that does not exist. And that's a dangerous thing to do. Technology moves at a fantastic pace. And the thing is that what is viable today or not viable today is viable tomorrow. And it makes no sense to plan too far ahead in a world where your solutions are based on technology, because we're looking at 3 years, at least 3 years before this remote ID network, remote ID is put into effect. In those 3 years, technology will have changed enormously. And anything that you propose and design now is already going to be out of date by the time you implement it. And that's not good sense. It's neither good fiscal sense nor is it good practical sense. And so I would say also you've got to if you had the proper risk analysis, you would know which people justify having this official accountability built in. Now, people who fly model aircraft, I've never heard of a single instance of somebody menacing an international airport runway with a quarter-scale Spitfire, gas-powered Spitfire or something like that, model, scale model. It doesn't happen. It just does not happen because the people in the traditional hobby are already accountable to themselves and to their peers. There is a great deal of self-policing goes on within the hobby community. I know even here at our airfield, where most people think we're just a reckless bunch of hoons, anyone that steps out of line gets stood on really hard. We tell them it's not acceptable, what you're doing is too risky, or it is unacceptable. We police ourselves. As a result, we have an impeccable track record of safety. And that happens at just about every club, everywhere in the world, I'd say. Just about every group, even every group in the world, they look out for themselves because we don't want somebody doing something bad that risks our freedoms. So we're thinking as much of ourselves as to other people when we stamp on that sort of thing. The FAA needs to be aware of that. They need to know that there are two groups of people, there are two types of people who fly model aircraft and recreational multi-rotor drones. There is the massive, huge majority flying these craft who are already responsible and accountable. And then there's the tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of people who are reckless. Okay? And it is not just, it is not fair, it is not reasonable to punish that massive majority for the crimes of the tiny minority. And remember, things have to be just to be effective. And that brings us to the issue of prohibition. What effectively the FAA is suggesting is a prohibition on the hobby. Like they did with alcohol back in the 1920s, like they did with cannabis in the 60s, 70s, whenever it was. The powers that be have decided this is unsafe, we're going to basically make it illegal. Doesn't matter how many people do it, most people enjoyed a tipple back in the 20s, and from the figures I've seen, at least half the population engaged in marijuana at some stage during their lives in the 70s, 80s, 90s. These were commonly done things, but the powers that be, holier than thou, decided we're going to make it illegal because we don't like it. And that's what's happening with the hobby. The FAA has decided we're going to make it illegal because certain friends of ours in the CDA don't like it. They don't like it at all. So we need to point out to the FAA that what the current NPRM represents is an effective prohibition of the hobby. It will be phased out over a few years as these freers are basically disappear due to land use change. And that prohibition has never been fair, it has never been just, it has never been effective. And cite the case of 1920s when alcohol was prohibited. And even with the might of the FBI, the entire FBI behind them, the government could not stop people from drinking. All it did was push the drinking underground and turn people into gangsters and criminals. Otherwise law-abiding, sensible, reasonable folks were made into criminals. And it funded the gangsters, the crime gangs. They got funded basically by the illegal drinking. And eventually, of course, they repealed those laws, and alcohol is just something you can buy in the shops now. It didn't work. It did not work. You cannot stop people doing things by law. If there's something that they're doing and they feel they have a right to do it and it doesn't injure other people, they'll do it, whether it's legal or not. And the same with flying models, especially in the new things like freestyle drone flying. A lot of rebellious people in the freestyle community, I'm one of them, and they will not allow regulations to get in their way. They'll go underground. And you can fly underground, can't you? That's legal. Anyway, the other thing is marijuana. And as I say, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, a lot of people smoke marijuana. And the government said, no, we're prohibiting marijuana. You can't. If it's a legal drug, you get locked up. Now, states around America are decriminalizing marijuana because the penny's finally dropped. Laws don't stop people. People are still smoking this stuff. They're still growing it. They're still dealing it. So all we're doing is making criminals out of people who really aren't hurting anybody. And we're actually putting money in the pockets of the gangsters and the gangs and the drug lords. It's a stupid prohibition. And the same will happen with models. with scratch-built models, with traditional models, with drones, you're just going to basically turn law-abiding folk into criminals, and prohibition and all its forms is always an abject failure. So why bother? Why don't you learn from the past? Learn from experience. Don't force people to become criminals with a rule that ultimately will fail. That's what I'd say. Learn from history. Those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. And the real danger is that, again, this makes the place unsafe. I would point out to the FAA that at the moment, their biggest allies are the hobby community and the responsible drone users. As a responsible drone user and a member of the hobby, on several occasions I have called out irresponsible people flying drones just here in our local town. I've seen people flying drones irresponsibly in the wrong place without the necessary knowledge or understanding, and I've gone up to them and said, don't do that. Land now. Please don't do that. And fortunately they have. Why have I done that? Why have I done that? I'm not a policeman. I'm not a killjoy. I'm not a, but I've done it to protect my own freedoms. It took me a long time to get permission to fly drones in the parks here. I don't want someone rolling up and taking that freedom away from me by being an idiot and causing problems, perhaps risking people's safety. So I take it upon myself to make sure that those people are made aware of what they're doing is unacceptable. I am the policeman. The Civil Aviation Authority in New Zealand, they're not standing down there checking. The police aren't standing down there checking. The local council isn't standing down there checking. But I'm there, and when I see bad things happening, I step in and I make sure that it's stopped. So this is what happens, I'm pretty sure, all around the world. People who are responsible hold people who are irresponsible accountable. They do the job for them. You don't want someone messing things up for you, so you go and you have a word with them, right? So we are the FAA's biggest allies. They're biggest allies. They do not have enough feet on the ground. Even if they had all the police involved, not enough feet on the ground who understand the problems to actually deal with this issue. Now, if the FAA decide, well, we're going to take the hobby, we're going to get rid of the hobby, they've lost a police force. They've lost their enforcement arm. They've lost the people who every day make sure that other people don't do bad things with drones. Can they afford to do that? This is counterproductive to safety. If I hadn't stopped some of these people from flying their drones where they were, there's a rescue helicopter or a hospital helipad just down the road. What would happen if a helicopter had come in and collided with the drone? I may have prevented disaster. And I did it because I'm looking out for myself and the other members of the community. If it was illegal for me to fly down there, or anyone, if people couldn't fly drones and I saw someone flying a drone illegally, I would say, well, why should I care? Because it's not like I can fly there, so good luck to you. And that's the attitude that people have to realise. That could prevail. If the FAA basically removed the freedoms that we have, why the hell should we go out of our way to police their rules, the very rules that have killed our hobby? So they need to be very much aware that there will be kickback from the hobby community and that they are going to be effectively doing exactly what they're trying not to do, which is reduce the safety of the national airspace. Something for them to think about. We've got to have this, these things have to be presented to them as to why what they're doing is wrong. And finally, we've got to give them suggestions. It's all very well saying you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. What they need to have is suggestions and ideas to replace the rules that they've been proposing. And there are many, many good ways to achieve these goals of safety, security, and accountability without the draconian restrictions that they're proposing. And I would say to the FAA, first of all, do your risk assessment. That's essential, so you know what you need to change and what you don't need to change. As I say, no gas-powered quarter-scale Spitfires menacing international airport runways. So you don't really need to deal with those people. They're dealing with themselves. They don't mess around with stuff that's working. And the other thing I'd say is look around the world. There are other aviation authorities that have done a very good job in certain areas in controlling the risk. I'd point to New Zealand, right here where I am now. For example, now a lot of the new type of flying with models is in parks, and it's in wooded glens. It's freestyle FPV, bandos, parks where you're not indoors, but you're not always outdoors. It's an in and out, and it's low level. People flying freestyle quads rarely get above 70 or 80 feet. Most of the time they're either below the tree cover, or they are just a few tens of feet above the ground. It's not a high altitude hobby. So we pose no risk to the manned aviation community, absolutely no risk. So you don't really want to be bothered with us. We're taking care of ourselves. We're keeping ourselves out of the risk area. So what you need to look at is, for example, New Zealand's shielded operations. Here in New Zealand, they've been very clever. They've said, well, yeah, okay, If you are flying a model or a drone in an area where there is no possibility of encountering a manned aircraft, we don't care about it. You're not on our radar. Because we're looking out for the safety of the airspace. Now, if there's no Cessnas or 747s or A320s in that airspace, it doesn't matter if there's a drone there. It's not an issue from a safety perspective. So we have a thing called shielded operations, which means I can go down to the local park and I can fly around under the trees, right up to the top of a tree and down again and all that sort of stuff, even though it's just a few hundred meters from a helipad. Yes, the hospital helipad is just down the road and the airport is just a kilometre or so the other way. So in any other country, these things I couldn't do that because I'm too close to airports. But in New Zealand, we know aircraft and helicopters land at airports. They don't land in parks next to airports unless something's gone drastically wrong. So you can fly at your local park as a shielded operation in an area where there will never be manned aircraft. And it's safe to do so. And that's been the case in New Zealand here for 5 years, I think. And there has not been one incident involving injury, damage, or death resulting from people flying their model aircraft and their drones in a shielded operation. So why would you want to concern yourself with that? FAA, why would you not say that's a brilliant solution to a relatively complex problem? Let's let people fly shielded operations. And if they're doing that, they don't need to be registered. They don't need to have remote ID because we don't want our UTM system cluttered up with all this noise from people flying in areas where we do not need to control them and manned aviation do not need to know where they are. Let's remove that noise from the equation. It means all the processing's faster and more accurate when dealing with the important stuff. So that's something that needs to be raised. Also, the whole issue of sub 250. Now, the FAA said, you don't have, remote ID won't be required on craft that are less than 250 grams. And that sounds pretty good, but they've reserved the right to impose it on sub 250 craft later on if they choose to, which doubtlessly they will, because even if you take away safety, you've still got security and accountability. They'll use those as justifications for saying, oh no, all these drones have to have remote ID now, and the technology is small enough, you can put it on a 100-gram model and it's not going to weigh it down too much. So it'll come. But why don't they look at Canada? Canada, again, it's another example of an airspace regulator who's come up with a brilliant solution to what's otherwise a complex problem. If you fly something that weighs less than 250 grams in Canada, not only do you not need to register it, but there are no prescriptive rules. All you've got to do is make sure that you don't endanger people or property. Really simple. You can't forget those two simple rules. It's not a case of pages and pages of rules and regulations, maximum heights and distances and things. No, if it's sub 250 grams, it's deemed to be safe enough that you can do what you like as long as you don't endanger personal property. Now, if someone flies a sub 250 drone into a car and breaks the window, they've broken one of the rules. If somebody flies a sub 250 drone and scares the snot out of some pedestrian who didn't see it coming and they complain, they've broken a rule because they endangered somebody. It's simple. The two rules are so simple that they can't be defeated by people who want to be assholes. And they've worked. I've not seen one reported incident in Canada since those rules were introduced and where a sub 250 gram craft has endangered a person or their property. Fantastic solution. FAA, learn from the countries around you. Learn from the experiences of others. Don't just roll out these ridiculously complex solutions and restrictive solutions to people who are not a problem. That's what I would say to them. Now, finally, I would say that we must make the point to the FAA that this safety, security, accountability as proposed by their rules comes at a huge cost. A huge cost to America's dominance, their position in the areas of aerospace engineering, aviation, and unmanned aviation. Because much of the technology that commercial operators are using today had its roots in recreational scratch building hobbyists. We basically, way back before there were commercial drones, we were flying drones with gyros out of helicopters in them rather than flight controllers. We really did a lot of work in the area of FPV, and a lot of the technology we have now, like the Pixhawk and the Cube and ArduPilot, a lot of stuff that's being used commercially, probably even militarily, stems from the hobby community, from the recreation, the open source hobby community. If you want to kill that, which is what the NPRM does, because basically no more scratch builds, unless you want to fly in that little grassy field, and that's gone in a few years. America is basically throwing up their hands and saying, we do not want to be leading the world in this technology. We're happy to buy our stuff from China or Israel or whoever it is at an enormous cost. And we don't care that when Boeing wants a new group of engineers, there's not going to be anyone standing at the door wanting to get in because people haven't gone through, they haven't been introduced to aviation technology through the hobby. And I bet you if you took a look at the profile of most of Boeing's engineers, most of NASA's engineers, most of McDonnell Douglas's engineers, they will have flown model aircraft at some stage. They'll have built model aircraft. You're going to take that away, those engineers, they'll go do something else. They'll get a law degree or become a doctor or a dentist. There'll be a dearth of engineers. America's dominance in the high-tech aerospace industries will dry up. They will become an also-ran. Can the country afford that? Can the USA afford to yield its dominance, its position in those industries? Because this NPRM will be instrumental in that happening. Need to point that out to them, that this will happen if this NPRM goes through. STEM and STEAM courses will suffer. Young people will not be able to build their own craft and fly them, and therefore they will not develop the passion that's necessary. Hobbyists will not be able to build their own craft and fly them, which will again not instill the passion for aviation that is really, and if you look at most engineers and most people at that level of aerospace, it is a passion. It's not just a job, not just a career, it's a passion. And if you don't have the passion, you don't go there. There are far better ways to make a lot of money than being an engineer. Engineering jobs don't pay that well. People go into aviation not because it's big bucks, but because it's fun, it's passion. You look at flight instructors. All around the world, flight instructors get paid up pittance. They get virtually nothing because the general course through the aviation industry is you start with model aircraft, you get excited about aircraft, you have a passion for aircraft, you get a pilot's license and you learn, wow, flying is fun. And then you think, I want to do it professionally. So you get a job or you train, you become an instructor. And then you get a job as an instructor where you're paid virtually nothing because all you're doing is building up your hours. So you can get a real job in a commercial situation where you get paid modest money you get paid to have a good day, basically. And so instructing is a stepping stone to a better career. But none of that ladder starts without the first rung, which is the hobby. So it needs to be pointed out to the FAA that you are dismantling the ladder that is the rungs to a career in aerospace, and that will disadvantage the whole USA, put it at a military and a economic disadvantage when compared to other countries where there is no such impediment. That's an important thing. As I say, we have to argue on fact and logic and evidence, and the fact is that if you do not have this grassroots interest in aviation fostered by the hobby, you will not get the engineers at the top, and you will lose your dominance in one of the most important fields in the modern world. So there you go. You'd be buying your airliners from China. Do you really want that? Well, let's find out. So there you go. That's basically, I was trying to structure this better, but it's too hard because even as I make this video, I've been coming up with other perspectives on here. And I'd say finally that, again, going back to the risk assessment that they haven't done, I'm all in favour of all these things being applied to commercial operations. If you're DHL, you're Amazon, you're Google flying drones, yes, remote ID is essential. Yes, all these other things are essential because these are big drones. These are heavy drones. These are commercial. These people making money out of these things, allegedly. I don't want a 50-pound drone flying over my head that isn't totally safe, that isn't totally secure, and for which the operator doesn't have utter accountability. I don't care that there's some kid down the park flying a toy under the trees. I really don't care. And the FAA shouldn't care either. They really shouldn't. So, yeah, that's basically where I'm coming from. I'd like your comments, please. I'm just in the process of finalising my own submission, which will basically be most of what I've said here, but more concise, more direct, more condensed and bullet point, because I don't want it to be too long. But I hope you've learned or gained some insight from what I've presented here. And if you've got questions, comments, I may do a follow-up. If there's a lot of questions, I'll just try and answer them. And maybe I've missed something, so I'll follow up again. As I say, it's taken me a while to do this video. I did do one earlier, but then I realized there were so many holes in it. I'd forgotten so much stuff, and then I wasn't feeling very well. So it's taken a couple of extra days to get it out. I apologize for that. But we do have until March the 2nd to make these submissions. And I'd really be quite happy that they all come in the last couple of days, just to make the workload heavier for the FAA and to show that there is groundswell of interest. Now, what I think you must do at this stage, is spread the word. It's beggars belief, and others are equally sort of can't understand. The AMA has 180,000 members. FliteTest has 600,000 US subscribers. Between my two channels, I have nearly 400,000 subscribers. But we've got 25,000 submissions. Seriously? Seriously? What are all you other people doing? Are you just going to sit around just, it doesn't matter, no, this is fine? Really, if you do not wake up and make a submission, then you're going to wake up in a couple of years' time and find that your hobby's gone. Your drone is useless. It's just not going to work. You have to, if there's only one thing you do this week, it's make that submission. Really, you have to do it. If you don't, then you are basically ankle tapping not only yourself, but your friends, your fellow flyers, other members of the hobby, and people like myself and also the industry who have a great reliance on the ability for people to fly models. It is such an important thing, I cannot stress enough. And remember, you don't have to be a member of the hobby to make a submission. If you haven't already made sure that your siblings, your parents, your grandparents, your friends that you have a beer with on a Friday night and aren't interested in models at all, if you haven't made sure that they've made a submission, then go and do it now. Go and do it now. We must get every person we can to make a submission. Otherwise, well, you reap what you sow. And honestly, this could end very, very badly. So, as I say, I hope I've given you enough information. It's way too much for one submission, but you'll have to go through and decide which bits you think are important. Go to the description. I've tried to do a little bit more concise down there what the key points are and where the evidence is and the facts and how you can put these together. But yeah, just go for it. Even if you think your submission is crap, put it in anyway. It all adds to the numbers. It all adds to the numbers. So there you go. Thank you for watching, folks. I will now get on and do my submission video so that you'll have you'll be able to see what I say. But don't just copy mine and put your face on it. That won't work. Thanks for watching, guys. And thank you to my Patreon supporters. They make these videos possible because, as you know, this will probably be demonetized, this video, like my last one was when I challenged the mainstream media. There you go. Enough from me. Bye for now.